Hi, I'm Jeremy White, and today I want to talk to you about the Canon T2i and the Canon 7D cameras. These are the new DSLR cameras that are revolutionizing the video industry. Right now I'm actually shooting on the Canon T2i. I'm using the kit lens that you can purchase. My audio I'm recording, I'm using the Rode mic that you can attach on top. It's not a great mic though, and actually I'd recommend instead that you purchase a Zoom H4n and some sort of wireless mic. And I'm actually going to switch right now so that you can see the difference in quality. Here's on the Rode mic that's attached to the top of the camera. And now we're going to switch right now to the Zoom so you can tell a big, huge difference in those sound qualities. Again, going back to the Rode mic. Here's the Rode mic so you can tell what the difference is. And now I'm going back to the Zoom. And there's the Zoom mic. Again, Zoom sounds a whole lot better. I like the sound of the Zoom. And you're just able to get closer to the subject and stuff. So I definitely recommend you buying an extra recording device. The Zoom's going to cost you about $300 or so, and you can buy it all over different places. It's a great thing, and I definitely would recommend buying it. You're also going to want to get another lens. This lens that I'm using right now, it's a wide-angle lens, but it's got a terrible f-stop. And unfortunately, that means you're not going to get a good depth of field, which is the reason you buy this camera. The number one thing about this camera is the depth of field options that it can give you. And this lens has terrible depth of field. Instead, what you're going to want to buy is something like this. This is the Canon fixed 50mm lens. It's going to run you about $350, something around there, and it can drop to an f-stop of 1.4, which means everything is going to drop out of focus behind your subject, and it's going to look beautiful. Such a cinematic look. You can't zoom on this low. That's the crummy thing. It's a fixed lens, so what you see is what you get. If you want to zoom in and out, you got to move your camera. But you're going to get great depth of field, and that's the reason you buy this camera. The depth of field is incredible. The audio is terrible. You got to have a second device, but the depth of field is amazing. Something that's tough about this camera is the size. It's a small camera. I'm used to recording with HMC 150s, the Panasonic camera, and they're considerably bigger, heavier cameras. This one's just real tiny. The 7D is a little bit bigger than the T2i, but both of them in general are just really tiny. And because of that, you don't have as many points of contact. Like if you're shooting with the HMC 150, you can put, you know, the viewfinder up against your eye. Here you just got your hands and you're kind of holding it out, which is the most awkward sort of way to try to balance anything, is something like that. So because of that, I think whenever you shoot with these, the handheld footage looks terrible. It's just really shaky and honestly unusable to me. So you're going to want to shoot on a tripod in a more traditional type of sense, or if you're one of those more run and gun sort of styles and have to move about, I'd recommend buying a really nice monopod. This is one I just bought, Bogeyman Photo Monopod, and this one right here cost me about $260–$270, but I love it. It's amazing, and I'm going to use it for a lot of my shoots. I've done shoots with the HMC 150 and the T2i. I personally like the footage and the image quality of the T2i better. There's been a bazillion, people that say this. I personally like the T2i's better. I think it looks more professional. Obviously, the depth of field is incredible. The audio is not good at all from it, and you're going to have to use audio from something else. But the image quality, if all you're looking at is image quality, the T2i, I think, is hands down the camera to go for. Now, another crummy thing about the T2i is that when you zoom, a lot of the lenses out there, they, for instance, this kit lens right now, if I were to zoom in and out, the aperture is in a fixed aperture, which basically that means if I'm to zoom in or out, it's going to be changing. And so you're going to be noticing the lighting do some really funky stuff, which is really, really crummy. So unless you have a nicer lens, you really don't want to zoom at all. And even then, it can give some weird looks. So these cameras aren't great for zooms by any stretch of the imagination. And on top of that, you would need to buy like a special zoom ring kind of thing to be able to make it to work well. So a lot of the controls on this camera aren't the same that aren't what you're used to with a traditional video camera. I'm used to switches and knobs and stuff like this, and here I've got to go through menus and settings, which they make sense, and I understand, hey, this is where that should be, but it's just different, and you can't get through some of the stuff as fast. I personally, I bought the T2i, but I kind of like the 7D a little bit better. You're going to pay a couple $100 more for it, but one, it's bigger, it feels sturdier and bigger and better to me. Second, it's easier to flip back and forth in and out of video mode. On the T2i, you got to turn this knob, sort of cranky knob, sort of at the top. With the 7D, you just flip a switch, so you can get really quickly to the video mode if that's what you want. Also, it's easier to change like your aperture and ISO settings. It's a lot easier on the 7D. The T2i, you got to push a button and crank a knob. The other one, you could just like crank the knob or whatever. It's just a lot easier, I think, on the 7D. You know, if you want to do an extra step, it's not crazy difficult on the T2i, but it's just an extra step. And personally, I just like the fast, quick, let me go and run with it. But I like my T2i, and I'm not getting rid of it by any stretch of the imagination. This is a great camera. Something that is a pain in the neck, though, is that this thing doesn't have autofocus. And some of you guys are screaming at me, I know, like, well, a true professional always uses manual focus. What are you talking autofocus? Well, you know what? That's just not practical in some situations. If you're shooting a lot of events, if you're shooting some sports and some of those kinds of things, you know what? It's just not practical. You know, when the bride's walking down, you don't want to be like trying to follow her with, you know, your focus, doing a rack focus shot as she's walking down an aisle. You just want to be able to zoom and follow her or whatever. So it can be a pain in the neck not having that autofocus. But to help with the focus, what I would recommend is that there's this thing called a Z finder that can attach to the back of your camera, and basically it magnifies that little LCD screen on the back of the camera and makes it so it's like this Jumbotron TV, and you're really able to tell if you're in focus or not. So I'd recommend picking one of those up. Again, I bought the Z Finder. There's a couple different versions out there. Z Finder had great ratings and reviews. It's going to run you about $375 though. And in general, that's one of the crummy things about the T2i is, yes, the camera's good, but if you truly want to experience it for what it's worth, you got to buy a couple extras. You got to buy a zoom. You got to buy some extra lenses, which are going to cost you a couple $100. You got to buy a monopod. You want to buy a Z finder. Some of those kinds of things, and you're going to start laying down some serious money. I still think it's worth it. I still love my T2i. Don't regret it at all. But it's not quite as good of a deal as you would think. You know, it's not like, oh wow, $700 or $800, $900, and I get a great camera. You know, if you really want to get the footage, you got to pay a little bit more. And so just be prepared to do that. Overall, love this camera. Highly recommend it. 2 thumbs up. Again, I'm Jeremy White talking about the Canon 7D and the T2i, which I'm shooting on right now.